So we're pulling out of the library for this particular tasting. This is our 2011 Semi Dry Riesling. We dropped that term semi-dry, I think it was the 13 vintage, mainly because semi-dry doesn't really mean anything. We put the scale on the back. Everybody knows classic Riesling has a little bit of residual sugar to it. So this was one of the last couple semi-dry labeled Rieslings that we did. But the 11 vintage is in some ways sort of this like classic middle line vintage for the Finger Lakes. We had a hurricane that came in a little before harvest, and so people were either scrambling to harvest well before the hurricane or well after to allow the vineyards and the fruit to dry out. This was chosen after the hurricane, but it made a really nice classic Finger Lakes Riesling style. 2011 was not a warm vintage. When I think about vintages, I probably would compare it to 2013, 2015, 2017. Not excessively bad, not excessively good. But the Finger Lakes shines in this sort of middle ground area where we get all of the difficult weather that we're used to dealing with in one vintage. With a Riesling that's been in bottle now for 7, 8 years, we're starting to get some good age on it. And just to speak a little bit about our library program, we are very keen on keeping wine back. So wines like this, we saved a pallet. Our 2012 Dry Riesling, we saved a pallet. We keep an extensive library that is not always easy to access, but when we reach a point where there's a wine that we'll be reintroducing, we pull it out of the warehouse, make it easier to get, and that's what this one is. So let's go ahead and taste it. So immediately you can see there's a big color difference. We are starting to get much more of that golden hue. It's not amber, but the combination of this being under cork and the age, it's entirely something I would expect. This wine was finished with right around 20 grams of residual sugar. I anticipate that to have been concentrated by this point. We will start to see the sugar tasting less sweet, more broad on the palate, and the acid should be working very well to keep this wine tasting youthful. So on the nose, I'm getting like that combination of lemon meringue pie with a crust that's been baked and maybe an extra thick crust. You're getting the brioche, you're getting this almost sort of cream element from baked pie crust, but it's combining with citrus that has been just toasted just a little bit. It's interesting because it smells sweet, it smells fresh, but it's got this deeper tone to it that I'm really looking forward to tasting. That's what I'm talking about, right? So this Riesling is tasting alive. It's exciting, but it's got depth and breadth. The finish just keeps lingering. And the flavors I get, it's not as identifiable of like this fruit and that fruit and this herb, like in some of our younger wines. It feels like as this wine has grown up and matured a bit, everything's kind of growing together. It's becoming much more of a unified expression from this vintage. With that said, this idea of lemon meringue pie remains solid. It's sort of combined with a little bit of baked apple pie. The sugar is restrained. It doesn't taste that sweet. I mean, compared to our 2018 Riesling, which is young and vivacious, right, that has a lot more sweetness, even though the chemistry of these two wines is very similar. I'm really glad we saved as much as we did. And I think, what tasting this wine right now tells me is we need to do a small partial release and hold on and let some of this age in a good condition for a much longer period of time and see where this is tasting in 2030. As far as what you compare with this, I tend to like, with a Riesling that's got a little more age, I like to treat it with respect in terms of what I pair it with. So I try and make better or more intensive or more food-focused meals. But with that said, I think, braised pork loin, I think a really well-prepared, very nice cut of pork chops would go great. I would bring this out on Thanksgiving. Great turkey dinners are perfect for Riesling. I would also try and have this with a very nice cheese course. So a great spread, I think it goes good with hard cheese. It goes good with soft cheese. The sweetness in there would even help it go really well with your blue cheeses. The other thing that strikes me is if you're a fan of aged Riesling, the TDN, that petrol note that comes in with Riesling as it ages, is still very far in the background. For those that don't like that note in aged Riesling, this is the sort of aged Riesling that you want to have in your cellar, because I just know based on how it's tasting, it's got a lot longer before that precursor becomes a dominant factor in this wine. So yeah, check it out. I think you're going to really enjoy this wine.